once again, a highly influential member of our community to help businesses. Ryan Mitton, you are the executive director for the CFIB, Canadian Federation of Independent Business for British Columbia. Welcome to our show on trade diversification, Ryan.
Thanks for having CFIB on the show.
Absolutely. Well, John and I felt a real need to put a dialogue together after earlier this year. Wow, seems like it was yesterday, but it was February when a crazy politician down south decided to randomly tax everybody with tariffs. We thought, how do we help our companies? How do we deal with this? We're both chamber members. We've both been involved with the chamber ecosystem for some time. We established a trade diversification committee of the Peninsula Chamber of Commerce, trying to represent businesses in this trade war. And you know what? It really impacts small business sort of a lot more than some larger ones, in my humble opinion. How is CFIB attempting to help the myriad of small businesses who might feel lost? But what do I do next?
Oh gosh, it has been such a tumultuous year with the trade war. And really, when I look back at 2025 and I look at the pressures that small businesses have faced, that has been the driving factor. It's not the only factor, but truly, I mentioned on your show before, when the tariffs finally kicked in March, that was when we saw our all-time lowest level of small business confidence in CFIB's history of measuring small business confidence. It dropped all the way down to 25 points. And just to give you an idea, 50 is the break-even point where half of small business owners feel confident about their future. So we were well below half. And BC's historical average is usually in the 60s, so a long way off of that. Truly concerning. But what CFIB has been doing is we, through our business advisory service and through our research capabilities, have been supporting our members, supporting our small businesses in helping them get CUSMA compliant, for example. If you want to avoid a lot of tariffs, signing up for CUSMA as opposed to paying tariffs was just one way that we're trying to help small businesses. It's a lot of paperwork. It can be confusing. It can be intimidating. But it's just one of the steps that we've been working through many businesses to help them stay on board.
There's some irony here in that when the free trade agreement was negotiated with the United States, Canada, was in a bit of a recession. And were it not for the opportunities that the FTA created for Canadian businesses in the United States, we'd have been in much worse shape. Here now we find ourselves in a situation where that market is becoming tough. But again, Ryan, I'd say to you, thanks to efforts by CFIB and others, the domestic market is opening for the very first time in the history of this country. And we're talking trade diversification. Well, one of the main targets of trade diversification should be strengthening the business ties across the country, one transaction at a time, which is an area of growth that perhaps offers a little less risk than going to far off cafe for a small business.
Yeah, and this has been a sea change in terms of how small businesses are planning their operations. We love to survey businesses to understand the on-the-ground impacts of this trade war. And we asked, are you pivoting away from U.S. markets, or are you staying the course? And over half of BC businesses have already either fully or in part pivoted their operations away from U.S. supply chains or U.S. customers. So it really speaks to how this trade war has impacted, who we sell to and who we buy from, especially on the small business front.
One of the one would seem obvious ways in which Canadian business can deal with and manage the impact of this tariff war is to start buying Canadian, buy local. And in fact, when we started the trade committee, and I surveyed a rough survey, it wasn't a sort of what are the issues you'd like? Well, one of them was we'd like to have folks buy more local goods. So what can businesses do? Is that are your surveys indicating the same thing? Are you encouraging government to put in policies for Canadians to buy local?
Yes, so we asked small businesses how they're responding to tariffs and the trade war. And overwhelmingly, where small businesses are pivoting their operations is back towards Canada. They're looking at Canadian suppliers, Canadian customers, Canadian supply chains. And we know that has an impact because 66 cents of every dollar that's spent local stays local. So that works on two fronts. It's, one, we are seeing people, about 40% of small businesses say that, Canadian made products have increased in sales. That's having a knock on effect to their operations. But also, where you shop is equally important. Going to a physical local store that whether or not they're selling Canadian products still has an impact because they have Canadian employees and they're run by Canadian families. And that's equally important too. We don't want to punish a local retailer just because they happen to still have some inventory on their shelves that was from the United States at that point in time.
Actually, that was one of the most common responses to the Buy Canada was, well, geez, what am I not going to eat a McDonald's? Am I not going to uh, that sort of thing, right? Well, guess what? They were all Canadian employees, all living in our community. I suppose you could argue till your eyes, till I don't know what happens, but yeah, please build upon that because that's a tough decision point for many people.
And by the way, all Canadian beef.
Okay.
Exactly. Well, you think about our supply chains, right? It's
Yes.
they're interwoven. Some, the way we make cars, even car will cross the border multiple times on its way to, the dealership. But that's why CFIB, as part of our efforts to help consumers and help small businesses navigate the intricacies of the buy local problem, we created a poster campaign for our members. You can find the downloadable poster on our website. It says proudly Canadian owned, shop local, and it allows small businesses. You look for the CFIB logo in the window, you look for our poster to say, hey, I'm here. We're a Canadian small business, and we've been really encouraged by the uptake for that program. And it's helping people navigate, what is local and, where's my dollar going?
Absolutely. Yeah. And what you're talking about here is consumer preference showing its force in the marketplace, not quite regardless of price, but where price isn't the only motivating factor. And we all live in the Greater Victoria area. There are market garden stores all over this amazing city. And when Beverly and I go in there, we're not worried about price. We know the produce came from a field that's right outside the window. If the broccoli is a few more cents a pound, it doesn't matter.
It has been so encouraging to see just how consumers have responded. I think despite the economic headwinds that small businesses are facing right now, and let's be clear, our tax situation is not very competitive here in BC, but the patriotism and the outpouring of support that we've seen for shopping local has been a silver lining to the economic picture that we've seen. And I don't think we'd be in as good shape right now without that.
Well, there's a further irony here. I would argue that it was during the depths of COVID when our main streets were largely closed, where stores would only allow, 2 or 3 customers in at a time, or all those restrictions. And of course, the restaurant trade as well. I think Canadians began to realize how important is Main Street? How important are those merchants to their lives, not just to buying of products, but to how they pass time and how they interact with people. And then along comes the trade war. Well, I think during COVID we developed a very special relationship with the small businesses that survived, and they certainly all didn't survive.
Mm-hmm.
And that has helped strengthen the reaction we're seeing now to the current stresses and threats.
And that shows up in our data too. I've mentioned our business barometer, and I will take monthly readings of business confidence. And one of the key differences in the trade war now compared to COVID then is that during COVID, it was short-term small business confidence that suffered the most. People were worried about making it through the next few months, right? but there was a general sense of understanding that, society could pull together. We would get through this, and there was a light at the end of the tunnel. The what's been shaken up here during the trade war is its long-term confidence that suffered the most. That actually dipped below short-term confidence measures because our worldview has shifted. Our understanding of our trade relationship with the United States has shifted, and small business owners are looking for a long-term vision for the economy. They need to know that we're going to change the way we do things. It's not just going to be, a short-term rally around the flag effect. It's going to mean that we're actually going to get real about how we do business in Canada and get real about how we do business in British Columbia and fix some of the fundamental factors that makes it difficult to invest and grow a business here in the province.
Yeah. So Ryan, and part of that, a challenge in maintaining confidence is that the decision maker impacting U.S. policy changes his mind every 2 or 3 minutes. And so it's hard to, what am I going to do 3 months from now? How can I protect myself? So we're going to talk again. Okay, we're going to talk again because, of course, the environment will have changed probably half a dozen times. But I'd like to deal with now something on a more macro level, okay? So we're generally speaking, when we're talking independent business, people think, the smaller businesses in the urban areas and supporting the towns, etc. However, there is a huge set of value-added small business supporting our large energy companies, our large transportation companies, our large forestry companies. When those companies are impacted, and they're generally on the news, and they are talking about their challenges, there's about 30 small businesses that support them that we don't hear about or talk about. How do you guys help those companies? Because that then takes you into forestry policy, automotive policy, tariff policy. What are you guys doing to help those people that can't do anything about these big decisions?
I'm glad you brought this up because you hit the nail on the head. When we look at small businesses and how they're impacted, the example that comes to mind immediately is softwood lumber, for example. The closure of the Crofton pulp mill on the island is going to be devastating for that community. And it's not just the mill; it's the restaurants, it's the bars, it's the pharmacies, it's the family-run businesses that rely on the anchor businesses in these communities. And that's why when we ask BC small businesses, do you support a strong natural resource sector? 8 in 10 say yes, it's critical for their business that we have these underlying industries that not just attract new investment, but also there's a trickle down effect in those communities.
Yeah, wow, that much, eh?
All of which adds even more pressure, I guess, to underline the importance of what we're getting from government in terms of the subject of this conversation, diversifying trade. And I'd be curious, Ryan, whether CFIB has or will do research into the attitudes of small business in Canada towards moving to not just to a more robust internal market, but moving to third markets, looking at opportunities in Latin America. Anyway, wherever.
Yeah. No, I mentioned that small businesses are pivoting back towards Canadian operations, but it's not just Canada. It's also, we asked where small businesses are prioritizing in terms of other trade jurisdictions. It's the European Union as well. 40% of businesses say that that's amongst their target destinations. Mexico as well. 24% say that they're looking there, and then essentially where I'm getting at is other countries that have free trade agreements with Canada, right? It's places where there's stable and predictable trade, because the big killer in this U.S. trade war is the uncertainty. As John mentioned, it's the unpredictability of waking up, checking Twitter, and realizing that the fundamentals of your business have changed on an hourly or minute by minute basis. So there's no way to run a business, and there's no way to run an economy, and that's why we need to provide as much certainty as we can for small businesses. And that starts with fundamentals. That starts with their tax structure. It starts with eliminating red tape. And, While looking within Canada is certainly one aspect, diversifying our market is another.
Yeah, and if
Well,
I'm not wrong, the Canadian Minister of Trade recently made a pretty significant speech on the question of let's go. Well, business should go where Canada already has active free trade agreements, and I think they've got. I mean, they've got many actually, and I think another 5 or 6 are under negotiation at the present time. So we have seek stability where we found it.
yeah,
And the role of government is in terms of how trade is done is exactly that, creating predictable conditions.
exactly. As I've stated numerous times on the different platforms that I yak on, I've been a independent, I've been a private entrepreneur all my life. I've run business all my life. I've worked through 6 or 7 recessions. One of them, I think, was a depression. At least, at the very least, I could see how we might come out of it. At the very least, I might, if these policies were implemented, if this government were, you could sort of plan, can't do it with this guy. Ryan, we're coming to an end, in large part because when we have digital conversations, the attention spans are so small. Anyway, what I want to leave you with, please, as I would with a chamber representative, which I would with any business organization, please let's advocate for solutions. Circle talk is unacceptable anymore. We can't just keep going on and on and on. And we need less taxes. We need to diversify trade. We need to deal with these safety and drug-related issues. And I don't want to be talking to you a year from now, and we're still talking about this stuff. Thank you, Ryan, for all your work that you do.
Well,
Yes,
thank you
thank
for
you.
having CFIB on the show.